Our first up guest for our International Worldview Conference for the next 2 days, the first guest up is Daniel Greenfield. Now, this guy is so busy. He cranks out more articles, literally, on a daily basis. I don't know of any other columnist that puts out as many articles in a given day as does Daniel Greenfield. And we have an awful lot to talk about today. He joins us now. Daniel, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I know it's very early out there, California time.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Let's start out with some of the news you have over at Front Page Mag. One of them that jumped out to me today was that New York freed 7,000 illegal alien criminals. Now, I understand President Trump wanted to put an ICE office inside the prison there, the jail there at Rikers Island. And apparently the government of New York would not let that happen. And thus a bunch of these hardcore criminals were released. And I'm hearing that there's pictures, mugshots of what some of them went on to do after they were released. That's all I know. I've told you everything I know. I bet you know a lot more. Tell me about it, please.
No, we talk about defund the police. Defund the police is not the real issue. Most places have not defunded the police. What they've done is created a revolving door for criminals to go in and out. Mamdani, the current, unfortunately, mayor-elect of New York, came to office promising to, among other things, shut down Rikers Island, which is a core of the revolving door complex. If you put an ICE office there, then as soon as these criminals are arrested, they would actually be primed for deportation. Instead, what's happening is that these guys are released pretty quickly. They commit more crimes. Some of these guys are arrested 100, 200 times. I'm not exaggerating this. There are criminals with hundreds of arrests because New York has eliminated bail effectively, which means that they are released almost as soon as they're arrested. ICE would be able to break the cycle because a lot of these people are illegal aliens. When Biden decided to completely open the border, a huge number of them came to New York City, Texas, some other places, Florida, also bust illegal alien migrants to New York City, which means you have this huge population, a violent population. A homeless man in New York City was recently set on fire by two of these migrants. So the result is you have them going in and out of the system, and the crime is exploding on a massive scale. And ICE would actually be able to intercept that process because when you have 7,000 illegal alien criminals, they can do incredible amounts of damage. And the refusal to cooperate with ICE has led to these people just committing burglaries, muggings, sexual assaults, every crime you can imagine.
Yeah. So let's go back to the setting someone on fire. I hate to say this, and feel free to disagree with me, but this has not gotten the news and the coverage on a national scale that happened previously when someone else was set on fire. I think that was also in New York, was it not? So, and the woman was standing there literally on fire. Now, another one has happened. Was that in Chicago that the other one happened?
Yeah. So,
and the reason I was going to say, if you want to correct me, is I feel like the country is becoming conditioned that this is, this is the new thing. Oh yeah, we've seen this before. Yeah, people are being desensitized, right? They're being desensitized to people being raped. I read today of a story of a woman, and I'm going to try to track it down. Maybe Logie, you can help me. A 30-something-year-old woman raped to death by an illegal immigrant on the steps of a government building in Nashville. We read about rapes constantly of women, people having their throats slit, now being set on fire. And I hate to say this, but I think there's a conditioning of the American people where this Overton window keeps moving and people aren't shocked. While they may be heartbroken about it and think that's too bad, they're not shocked by it because these things are now becoming part of our everyday life in America. But when you and I were growing up, the thought of someone being raped on the steps of a government building, someone being set on fire, this would be wall-to-wall coverage because this was so outside the norm of the culture of the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. Am I wrong to say that the American people are being conditioned and are falling for the conditioning where they're now not shocked by it, but even that, It doesn't get the attention. It gets ignored by the media. And even on social media, I haven't seen a lot. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. This is being normalized. The first time somebody gets set on fire, there's a lot of coverage. There's, especially when there's video, it's all very shocking. Then the second time it happens to a woman, well, I guess it happens. When it happens to a homeless guy, well, we don't even pay too much attention to it because now setting people on fire is just something that goes on. It's just a new normal. And this is absolutely how horrifying things are normalized. The Democrats, the left, does this on a regular basis. They teach us to accept that crime of this kind is the new normal. For a while, New York City, when you just had a random stabbing on the subway, that was news. These days, random stabbings are not news anymore. You had a guy committing necrophilia on the subway. That was big news. The second or third time it will happen, it will no longer be news. And we are being taught to accept, we're being slowly boiled like lobsters in a pot, that these conditions are normal. And the Democrats and the police will come back and say, well, it's social conditions. We can't do very much about it except just to throw more welfare at the problem. We can't actually lock up criminals because that's just not going to work. You had the Hennepin County DA in Minnesota, Minneapolis specifically, where the Somali crime wave is, coming out and saying, we can't just, use the old and busted method of locking them up and throwing away the key. You know what? That method was actually really great because when you lock a guy up, he can no longer set anybody on fire. It's incredible.
Yeah, amazing how that works. Logan, I'm going to be asking Logan over the next 2 days to pull a lot of stuff at a moment's notice. Is it possible, Logan, we can pull the first part of the documentary Siege, where we have Daniel Greenfield talking about civil war in America? I believe that's in the very first part. I think I opened the documentary with Daniel Greenfield talking about we're in a civil war. I want to play a little bit of that in just one moment when you have it ready. Oh, and the Siege book, by the way, is now in the vault. So we turned that into a book. My documentary Siege, Sabotage, my book on Hamas, all of these have come out now. They're all in the vault. You don't need to buy them. You can get them at worldviewtube.com/vault as part of your membership. I want to talk to you about that idea of civil war, because you were one of the first people to say we are involved in a civil war. And that Siege documentary of mine that you opened, that documentary, I grabbed a speech I think you gave at a Tea Party group or something. And I opened the documentary with that. And I even had some, I won't say names, so I'm not looking to ridicule anybody, but I had some very well-respected people who said, you really want to put Civil War and World War III in the subtitle of your documentary. I was talking about globalism, World War III, Civil War, globalism, and a few other things in the subtitle. And a couple of well-respected people said, do you really want to put World War III? And then another one said, do you really want to put Civil War? And I'm like, well, you don't think we're already involved at a level of World War III with propaganda by our enemies, cyber hacking, the weaponization of economics, the economic warfare that's going on, funding terrorist groups and propaganda inside our country and universities. I said there are various types of war, and these are all the things you do as you are going to war. And then as far as the Civil War goes, well, what do you think is happening when we have the lawlessness by elected officials and by police officials, and at the time, lawlessness by our FBI and other government agencies? What do you call this, if not a civil war on the American people? Well, you brought up Minneapolis. You brought up Minnesota, the Somali problem there, because I think this is more indication we are involved in a civil war, and the police, law enforcement, is going out of their way to stop the government to doing its rightful position constitutionally and biblically. Romans 13, reward the righteous, punish the wicked, make a stable and just society. They're now going out of their way to stop removing people from our country who are known rapists, serial rapists, child rapists, gangbangers, running drugs for their cartels, now involved in $1 billion scam in Minnesota alone. And now you have a police official saying this. Watch and listen, and Daniel will respond. To stop the government. I think I got another audio running somewhere, so let me turn that off. I think I know exactly where it's at. That was me talking with a few minutes few second delay. Did that take care of that, Logan? I took care of that. Now I'm going to go back and find the clip. Here we go. Here it is. Minneapolis police official. Here we go.
Masked, that they're not sure if they're law enforcement, that they may be kidnapping people. Like, we have had those reports. I want to be clear to the community. The community should know that if you see something like that, that is legitimate, that you don't know if someone is law enforcement, you should call 911. And you should provide as much information as possible, because let's not forget, we very recently had tragedy in this state by someone who was purporting to be law enforcement. So please, let's be clear. That's something everyone should report, and that we will immediately respond to, and we will document, whether it's somebody's not sure if there's a kidnapping happening, somebody's not sure if that there's law enforcement present or not. And that's something else, that's additional policy requirements that we are implementing, that we will document and report these types of things anytime that we hear it, and reminding our officers of their duty to intervene. So if there is anything that is, a violation of someone's human rights or civil rights, excessive force or anything like that, they absolutely have a duty to intervene as police officers.
Wow, intervene. Now, wait a minute. I agree to not violate people's civil liberties or rights, but is he implying that his officers are going to intervene when ICE is in the Twin Cities arresting these Somali immigrants? Is that a violation of their civil rights? I mean, the United Nations wants open borders. That's what Agenda 2030 is all about. Is that a civil right to go anywhere in the world you want, whenever you want? So, I mean, who defines these terms is the question. Is he saying that Minneapolis police are going to oppose ICE? Is that what they're doing up there?
So tellingly, he uses civil rights and human rights. We have a legal definition of civil rights. We don't have a legal definition of human rights. That's not American law. That's international law. That's a UN term. So under the UN's idea of human rights, we can't deport illegal aliens at all. So what's been going on here is part of a bigger picture, which is that politicians, Democrat politicians, have been pushing local police forces to intervene to block ICE from operating. We've seen that in action in Portland. We've seen that push in California. We've seen that in New York. They're actively trying to push the police to engage in interventions. Now, local on-the-ground police generally understand this is a very, very bad idea. But at the same time, we've seen some counter behavior. Particularly in Portland, we've seen the police actively working to to protect some of the anti-ICE rioters, which is unfortunately all too normative. Basically, if you're a leftist rioter, you get police protection. If you're opposed to them, you get arrested. I've seen this on the ground myself in LA back in the day when these people were harassing synagogues. So when it comes to ICE, though, this is a very trickier area, specifically because, this is Civil War territory. Having local law enforcement confront federal law enforcement. And again, most law enforcement officials locally understand that this is very dangerous territory, but they're trying to get themselves pushed into standing in the way there. And that potentially is a crisis situation, because it only takes one idiot trying to pull a gun on ICE to create a major, major incident.
Now, I want to go to the whole issue of civil war. You said in this clip we have a civil war. People say, well, there's no one shooting at each other. And you say, well, that's how a civil war ends, right? Before I go to some of this clip from our documentary in 2019 with you, is this not indications more of a civil war when local and state officials are going against the legal? And I'm not talking about local or state officials resisting tyranny. They have every right constitutionally, morally to do that. Apparently, they didn't want to do that during the Biden administration when the FBI was kicking down the doors of pro-lifers and other people and grannies because they simply showed up on the Capitol lawn. Some of them didn't even go in the building to practice their freedom of speech and right to public assembly. So there was no talk of this, right? There was no talk of opposing tyranny when many of these blue states wanted to shut people down with COVID and lockdowns and shut down schools and churches and how many people have in your home. But now, all of a sudden, these folks want to stop a legitimate function of the federal government, which is to get terrorists, would-be terrorists, and known terrorists out of here, stop would-be rapists and known rapists and murderers from getting out of jail who are illegal, holding them so we can deport them and send them out of here. No, they let them go. They stop the ICE procedures. And then, of course, these people go on to rape and murder and kill. Now, is that all part of a civil war scenario when you have local and state governments working against legitimate federal policies to try to stop the foreign enemies that have sent in their criminals and thugs to create chaos? Is this not a sign we're in a civil war?
Sorry. Back when I did that speech at the Tea Party, I used the term cold civil war, which is before the shooting starts. And, these days, nobody's really arguing with that, the concept of a cold civil war. And what's happening in that situation is two scenarios which can go together. First is you've got a zero-sum game between two factions, both of whom want to solidify absolute total control of power in the country. The second scenario is when you have local conflict and undermining of any kind of functional authority to create chaos and splinter any ability to manage the country. The Democrats have managed to combine both, and it's most graphically obvious with illegal aliens, with mass border migrations. So in the past, what they've said is states cannot do any kind of immigration enforcement. That's the job of the federal government. And of course, the federal government refuses to do the job of immigration enforcement. So the Obama administration, the Biden administration would go after Arizona or Texas for trying to restrict illegal aliens. Under Biden, we actually saw the Border Patrol being tasked with removing any kind of fencing put up by the state of Texas to keep illegal aliens out of the country. So you have on the one hand anarchy, on the other hand you have tyranny, which is the anarcho-tyranny situation that you have. And the purpose of this is ultimately to fundamentally alter the country. Bringing in massive numbers of illegal aliens is the basis for democratic power. When you look at the actual demographic basis, Democrats really have an increasingly tenuous grip on political power. Their whole principle is really bringing massive numbers of illegal aliens, packing them into districts they control, and really in a kind of a recap of the Civil War, using these people, many of whom cannot even vote and don't actually vote, to create districts that Democrats can control because they don't actually ask about citizenship on the census. This was the big battle that in the first Trump administration. So the result is they have a lot of fake districts packed with illegal aliens that they use as the basis for their political power. And they have to maintain this flow. And the Biden administration knew what it was doing when it was bringing these massive numbers of illegal aliens. And of course, creating crime is a plus there because the more chaos you create, the more people are terrorized, the more likely they are to just be subjugated, which is also something that we see in major blue cities. People wonder, why do they keep voting for leftists? One major reason they keep voting for leftists is because everything looks terrible and they look to the guy furthest to the left, like Mamdani, as offering some kind of solution because there isn't meaningful competition there. So the result is the left solidifies its grip on power and eliminates any of the checks and balances, and it tries to have it both ways at the same time. The Trump administration, though, is pushing back on it really for the first time.
So have we moved from a cold civil war to a hot civil war?
We're on the boundary. It could take very little at this point to trigger a hot civil war because both sides are kind of playing with tinderbox there. For example, the Democrats kept talking about how they were going to add two states. They were going to add D.C. and Puerto Rico as states, rig the Senate, and effectively rig future presidential elections. If they were to actually go ahead and try to do that, which at this point I think is increasingly likely they will, that would be a civil war scenario. If they pack the Supreme Court, potential civil war scenario.
Listen to this comment. This was a comment made by Democrat Senator Mark Warner, talking about the uniformed military may have to save us from President Trump. Listen to this.
Unprecedented disrespect when they were all brought to get a pep rally in front of Hegseth and Trump. This is an administration that's fired, uniform generals from the head of the NSA, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And I think in many ways, the uniformed military may help save us from this president and his lame people like Hegseth, because I think their commitment is to the Constitution and obviously not to Trump, and I expect Bradley to adhere to that.
So, Senator, let's go a little further.
So there you go. What do you make of that comment? We may have to have the uniformed military may have to save us from the president. Add that to what's going on with the seditious six, as they're called. Again, is this all set up for undermining our military, the command? And again, they're really going after Pete Hegseth related to the striking of these boats out of Venezuela. There seems to be a concerted effort to really destroy the Pentagon, the military, the command structure, following orders. What do you make of this, and how does this play into our Civil War scenario?
Well, Secretary of Defense Hegseth is the #1 target after President Trump of everybody, and I mean everybody, which is very revealing. The left is going after him. We've had some people on the woke right that are coming after him too, trying to undermine him, trying to force him out. And you have to ask, why is Hegseth such a major target? We're not exactly involved in any kind of significant war, so why go after Hegseth? Well, one of the answers is that you have control of the military this way. They want to go after Hegseth. They want to replace him with one of their own people. The Koch brother now has managed to infiltrate a lot of his people into the Defense Department, the National Security Council, but they didn't count on President Trump going ahead and choosing Hegseth. Hegseth was not on the list of people they presented to Trump. They had these lists that they tried to jam and manipulate presidents with. These are the people who are supposed to pick from to pick your next Secretary of Defense. And President Trump said, I want Pete. And he got Pete Hegseth. And they've been going after Pete Hegseth ever since. So anytime you see somebody going after Hegseth, you know what their ultimate agenda is, no matter who they claim to be, if they claim to be a Republican or a conservative or whatever. Second point, the Biden administration unleashed a massive campaign to purge the military. Obama was doing that too. This was something that was following up on what Clinton was doing. Clinton, Obama, Biden administration spent a lot of time purging the military, specifically of conservatives, wokening them, bringing a lot of people who are leftists into the upper ranks of the military, imposing DEI, and particularly during the Biden administration, forcing out people who wouldn't take the vaccine, forcing out people who had any sort of conservative views whatsoever. This was not a coincidence. It was not chance. It was not just DEI as usual. They were specifically trying to take control of the military. Why did they want to take control of the military? Well, we got a preview after January 6th. You had an unprecedented event, which, 20, 21, 24, there are a lot of unprecedented events, but you actually have Biden, the new president, supposedly, being sworn into office surrounded by military people. D.C. has been locked down. The National Mall is locked down. Huge numbers of National Guard troops have been deployed to D.C., keeping people out. Everything is under a military regime. It's like the green zone in Iraq there all of a sudden. Well, people kind of quickly forgot about that. We tend to quickly forget about things, especially these days. It's like the people being set on fire, when horrible thing happens. Another horrible thing happens, we forget about the first horrible thing. But the post-J6 thing was absolutely a trial run, and the massive military deployment during Biden's inauguration was a trial run. When Biden gave that speech flanked by Marines, that was not a coincidence. It was not just bad optics, as the media put it. Again, this was a trial bubble. They were specifically trialing out declaration of a national emergency, martial law, bringing in the military to secure everything. To do that, of course, you need to be able to trust the military. Flashing back to the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union, there's a coup, they remove Gorbachev, they send in the troops, they send in the tanks into the streets of Moscow. It turns out the Russian soldiers do not actually want to use force against protesters against the coup, and the whole government collapses. In China, however, in Tiananmen Square, the people come out, but it turns out that the Chinese military is quite happy to use armed force against the people who are standing in their way. So they want to make sure that the United States military is not the Russian military, it's the Chinese military. And to do that, they have to take control of the military as much as possible.
Let's go to a clip before we go to Inmar Marcus and Annie Cyrus, who are going to join us. And by the way, folks, tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social. Let folks know we are live with our two-day International Worldview Conference today, December 4th and December 5th, Thursday and Friday. So tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social. Let everybody know we're on the air live, and we got some very special guests talking about what happened in 2025, what they see coming in 2026. I'll ask that of Daniel Greenfield of frontpagemag.com and danielgreenfield.org in just 1 second. But first, here's a small clip from my 2019 documentary. This is Daniel warning several years ago about the cold civil war. And he now says today, we're right on the line between a cold civil war and a hot civil war here in America. Watch just a little bit of this clip from our documentary from 2019.
But we do have a civil war. And why do I call it a civil war when there's no fighting in the streets? What is a civil war really about? It's not about the guns. When you are actually shooting each other, that's how a civil war ends. That's the beginning of the end, one way or another. A civil war begins with politics. We had organizations within the government, some people call them the deep state or the shadow government, whatever you want to call them, who are determined that they're the ones who are going to be in power. Sometimes they're subtle about it when they're within the bureaucracy. Sometimes they're very obvious about it, such as when federal judges announced that President Trump has no right to set any policies whatsoever that they disagree with. That's effectively a civil war. There may not be any shooting, but there's a power struggle. There's a struggle for control of the government.
Would you
Wow. Well, there's a power struggle going on, that's for sure. All right. Tell me what you think are some of the biggest stories of 2025, and what do you see coming in 2026, Daniel, before we let you go?
Well, President Trump has been on a good run. I know some are critical to actually try and impose major reforms. We haven't seen much of that in the first Trump administration. The second Trump administration is actually moving forward. But of course, the big fight is going to be over Congress. The Democrats are betting that they're going to be able to at least take the House in 2026. I think they have good odds of doing so. And at that point, it's really going to be very much up to President Trump. Unfortunately, at the same time, you have the Republican Party, the conservative movement fragmenting, turning to infighting, in part driven by the question of who's going to succeed President Trump in 2028, and in part on, we've won now, let's fight over the spoils. All this is, of course, a really catastrophically bad idea, but it's also very much human nature. And as conservatives, you understand that human nature is inevitable, and you deal with it rather than advocating that it should not exist. So we have to keep our eyes on the ball in the big picture, which is really, are we going to turn the things around? Are we going to save America before it is too late? And there's a lot at stake here. The left really wants to divide the country. They want to divide into a binary, much has happened in World War II between communism and Nazism. They want to get us to the point where we find that communism is acceptable because the alternative is Nazism. And there are some people on the right who are playing that same Nazism game because they're happy to do it from the other side. The thing to remember, though, is, Nazism is National Socialism. So you have two sides of socialists with minor disagreements who are playing this game. And our mission, our job is to fight for the country that the Founding Fathers created, to fight for a constitutional America, one in which we actually have power, which power comes from the people. It doesn't come from a few DC elites. And President Trump has made important steps in actually taking apart some of the mass bureaucracy, the deep state, the vast government that's been created. We have a whole lot more to do. And we have to get serious about the idea that political power has to be returned to the people. And I think that's something we are losing sight of. And I think it is a very compelling message to ordinary Americans. We talk a lot about what populism means. Populism doesn't just mean cheap products in grocery stores. I'm shopping in supermarkets. I see how bad prices are, and there are things we should be doing about them, things we can't do about them. But ultimately, populism is about letting the people actually call the shots.
You said some things there that are so important. We need to have you back to talk about. The right, many on the right are being set up as the new Nazis, if you will, the anti-Semitism, and even people talking about a so-called Christian nationalism. And I hate that word because I think we should be talking about patriotism, and our own national sovereignty, instead of falling into the trap of using the terms like Christian nationalism. But people use it. I don't like it because, again, I think it's falling into a trap. Hitler was into a nationalism that saw the state was of primary importance, of fascism. Many of the Republicans are pushing a big government, big business merging together, which is a corporate fascism. So you see things going on the right. But then you see major social media people pushing this idea of anti-Semitism, really criticizing Christians, such as myself, that are strong Christian Zionists. You have this racism being spewed on the right. And that's very interesting. You say that the right is being set up as the Nazis, and then the left are the communists who are going to oppose, come and save you. The communists will come and save you from the Nazis. And that's how the two sides are being presented. And that's very, very interesting. Very interesting that Hegelian dialectic, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, to create the conflict. And sadly, in the middle, that pincher strategy or scissor strategy, in the middle are the real conservatives, Christians, patriots, and Jews are being pinched in the middle. Closing comment?
I think those are all very important points. We should not have to choose between two evils, between Nazism and communism. We have to choose America, and that's the ultimate question here. Are we actually restoring America, or are we playing into the hands of various foreign and domestic influencers who want to tear America apart?
Tell us about your book, Domestic Enemies, over your shoulder there.
No, it's a history of the left in America from the very beginning. It shows that the Founding Fathers faced the same battles that we face today. This is not a new war. We've won it before. We can win it again.
Thank you, as always, for being with us and all your great work over at frontpagemag.com and danielgreenfield.org. I have those websites correct, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Daniel Greenfield checking in today. We appreciate him.